Crusades at home. Of course, at home in this context is Western Europe. As time went on, there were some battles waged in Europe itself that bear the title Crusade. Some resembled the Crusades to the East in some regards, and some of them did not. There was a crusade against the Albigensians in southern France. Next lesson, I'm going to talk about who the Albigensians were and why they caused so many problems. But there was a crusade called against them, which did not end up solving the problem of the Albigensian heresy prior to the establishment of the Papal Inquisition, which did solve the problem of the Albigensian heresy. I'm going to talk about that in our next lesson as well. This crusade devolved quickly into a prolonged skirmish over land by nobles. Although it was called by a pope, there was no pilgrimage connected to it. The Albigensian Crusade provides us of a good example of an endeavor that was called a crusade, but really wasn't a crusade in the truest sense. And there were a whole bunch of them. Sometimes they were over more local skirmishes. Sometimes they dealt with invaders on the borders. There were just a lot of these. But there's one that I want to talk about, and that is the Reconquista of what we now call Spain. The Reconquista was a true crusade that was fought in Europe, although it actually didn't begin as such. It began long before the crusading movement started. It began actually in the 700s or 800s. Most of the Iberian Peninsula, save a small territory in the north, had been conquered in the 700s, and the former Visigothic kingdom, which had become Christian under St. Hermenegild in the 500s, was under Muslim rule, except a very small sliver of land at the north that remained an independent kingdom of Christians. You can take a look at this map. The section in gray is the very small kingdom, independent kingdom of Christians. You can see all of the Iberian Peninsula. What would someday be Spain, what would someday be Portugal, is in 756 AD Islamic territory. Now, right from the start, the popes encouraged the Christians of the Iberian Peninsula to reclaim these lands. Roughly between 740 and 1492, yes, it went on for about 700 years. This went on for a long time. Now, it went in waves, so it wasn't like there was constantly war going on for 700 years. But over 700 years, Christians gradually reconquered the entire peninsula, which is where the term Reconquista comes from. There's an interesting visual. I'll show this to you at the end when we finish up this lesson. It's the Reconquista in 1 minute using Google Earth. It kind of shows you how the balance of power shifted over these 700 years. It's pretty cool. We'll look at it in a couple minutes. This conquest took on properties of a crusade when the tomb of St. James the Elder was discovered in the northwestern corner of Spain around the year 820. Between the time of this conquest and 1492, Christians gradually reconquered the entire peninsula. This conquest took on properties of a crusade when the tomb of St. James the Elder was discovered in the northwest corner of Spain. Of course, before long, this became a site for Christian pilgrimage, and the Camino de Santiago, the Way of St. James, a network of pilgrim routes from France across the north of Spain to the site of the tomb, developed. As a pilgrimage destination, a plenary indulgence was attached to the pilgrimage to the tomb of St. James, and this soon reforged a strong relationship between the Christians of northern Spanish kingdom and the rest of the Christians of Europe. You know, there for a while they were kind of cut off. and the rest of the Christians of Europe didn't really have a connection to that independent kingdom in the north of Spain. Now that there are pilgrims coming across northern Spain to go to the tomb of St. James, that connection is reforged. Although this was not ever officially named a crusade per se, going all the way back even to the First Crusade, Christians on the Iberian Peninsula were specifically asked by the Pope not to go to the crusade in the East. You'll notice there were no Spanish contingencies in the First Crusade. They were asked to stay home, they were given the chance to take the cross, and they were eligible for the Crusader indulgence at home with the pilgrimage to the tomb of St. James. That was preferred because they wanted those Christians to, deal with what they needed to do at home. And this crusade, so to speak, was actually the one that turned out to be the most successful. The entire peninsula was reconquered by 1492, and it was not lost after that. So you can see here on this map the stages of the Reconquista. Like I said, on that video I'll show you, you get kind of a better view of it. In 1469, the independent kingdoms of Castile and Aragon, we'll see a map in a second, united when the Catholic King Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella, heiress of Castile, married. Now, where have we heard of those guys before? Ferdinand and Isabella. Columbus, yes indeed. They were the ones who sponsored Columbus and sent him on his merry way. The very same King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. They were busy. A lot happened while they were in power. So here you can see by 1469, really the Islamic presence in the Iberian Peninsula has already been cut way down by this point. It's only that green section down at the bottom. There are at this point 3 independent Christian kingdoms throughout most of the Iberian Peninsula: Aragon, Castile, and Portugal. By this point, of course, most of the Iberian Peninsula had been won back, and there was only the one small remaining Islamic kingdom in the south of what would become Spain. The Muslims of the Iberian Peninsula had divided and were weakened by infighting. Once again, Muslims starting to turn on each other and fight amongst themselves leads to them being conquered and ousted from the region. So when the forces of Aragon and Castile united against them, they rather easily reconquered that last piece of Spain, and the Reconquista was successful and complete by, yes, that same famous date, 1492. This doesn't mean that all was well and peaceful in Spain. The events of the Reconquista led to events that would lead to the Spanish Inquisition. That's the one that gives the Inquisition a bad reputation, and the one that was not officially sanctioned by the Pope.